Thanks, Tim. Look, welcome everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to talk through what we're doing at Ionic Rare Earths. We're taking our unique asset at Makuutu to develop a downstream supply chain of both magnet and heavy rare earths. Next slide, thank you. Just our cautionary statement, and moving on to the next slide. So the opportunity that we're focusing in on is the ability to provide new supply of both magnet and heavy rare earths into these new Western markets that are emerging at the moment. The rare earth supply chain is completely dominated by China. When we look at the main application, the highest value application of rare earths in the current climate, it's permanent magnets. So neodymium iron boron permanent magnets, which are used in a number of applications, but are going to be used increasingly in the net zero carbon technologies, principally EVs and offshore wind. So as we look to these markets that are going to emerge over the next 30 years, we see a massive opportunity for Ionic Rare Earths with our basket of magnet rare earths. Importantly, we have the full spectrum of magnet rare earths, much more than just neodymium and praseodymium. It's the dysprosium and terbium where we see tremendous opportunity for Ionic, given that at present, about 98% of the world's current supply of dysprosium and terbium emanates from China. We can see substantial statistics around forecast adoption of specifically EVs, and noting overnight that California has implemented a ban on gasoline-powered cars by 2035. We see a tremendous groundswell of opportunity that's emerging in the magnet rare earth space. Moving on to the next slide, thanks. So in order to satisfy that emerging opportunity, we've got the asset at Makuutu, a large ionic adsorption clay deposit, a very unique deposit in the context of other rare earth investment opportunities that many Australian investors have had access to. These assets are very rare. They're common in southern China and Myanmar. As I mentioned earlier, they're the source of a substantial amount of the world's current supply of both magnet and heavy rare earths. When we talk about heavy rare earths, one of the major constituents there is yttrium. Yttrium is critical for the F-35 fighter jet. All yttrium comes from China, and so hence we've had tremendous interest from key Western governments like the US that's looking to get a secure and stable supply chain of heavy rare earths independent of current supply out of China. So we've got a tremendous asset with Makuutu. It's a near-surface mineralization which enables us to employ very simple mining and processing techniques, and importantly produces a product with no radionuclides. From that product, a mixed rare earth carbonate produced at Makuutu in Uganda, we're looking at going downstream, developing our own refinery, refining the mixed rare earth carbonate to oxides, and then potential to work with emerging supply chain partners to take that oxide material and convert it to metals, alloys, magnets. So we do see this as an opportunity that is going to increase in demand substantially over the rest of this decade. We've also added magnet recycling capability, and so we're looking at that vertical integration and circular economy of rare earths and taking a leading position in those markets that are going to emerge. The basket from Makuutu and the offering from Ionic, it's rich in both magnet and heavy rare earths. And so we have received tremendous potential engagement from end users who are looking at secure and new and emerging supply chains without any sourcing from China. And if we look at the sheer demand on magnet rare earths, just to meet the previously committed targets on EVs and wind turbines, there's projected to be an 8-fold demand increase in magnet rare earth supply by the end of the decade. So we do see a tremendous opportunity moving forward. So next slide, thanks. Just a quick corporate snapshot. We have about 3.8 billion shares on issue, trading at around about 5 cents at the moment. So market cap's around about $200 million. Cash at the end of the last quarter was around about $26.8 million. So we're well funded. We did a capital raise earlier this year, and we raised 30 million from mainly global institutions and thematic funds. And we are looking to create substantial value over the next 12 months as we take forward both the Makuutu project, magnet recycling, and also putting some more definition around downstream supply chain. Moving along to the next slide. So if we take a closer look at Makuutu and just talking about that asset, it's a massive resource. We recently announced a 500% increase in the indicated resource base, and we are focusing on the completion of a feasibility study focused on the Makuutu Central license, which will be required for a mining license application, which we're looking to submit by the end of October this year. We currently own 51% of the Makuutu project. We have preemptive right on the remaining, we moved to 60% on the completion of a feasibility study, and we have a preemptive right on the remaining 40%. A very strategic asset, very hard to find these assets outside of southern China and Myanmar. It's one of two that are development ready globally. And we do see a great opportunity given that the other ionic adsorption clay being developed in Brazil has its product committed to China for some period of time. So when we're looking at these new supply chains and where they're going to source material from, we're in a unique position in that we're very close to being in a position where we can start operations hopefully around second half of 2024 and getting this asset into production. All the infrastructure is available at Makuutu, and beyond the large resource, we've got substantial exploration potential. We announced an Expiration Target earlier this year, which has the potential to double the resource again. So just moving on to the next slide. We've recently completed our public hearings on our environmental and social impact assessment. Very strong engagement in Uganda. We've had very strong support from stakeholders at government level, government departments in the local community. We recently held 2 public hearings with over 3,800 interested stakeholders attending those 2 events. So we have had a tremendous support as we move Makuutu through this mining license application process. Moving on, thanks. So if we look at the resource, it's a long mineralization trend, stretches approximately 37 kilometers long end to end. The resource that we've defined covers approximately 26 kilometers of that. And if we look at the mining license application, it's around that Makuutu Central area. So that's the area of the retention license, which is coming up for renewal or expiry at the end of October, and hence a requirement to move swiftly to a mining license application. Moving forward, on the exploration license or the Expiration Target, the areas we've identified with potential to grow. Obviously, we have a large radiometric anomaly out to the east. We've done some initial reconnaissance drilling out there. We drilled 23 holes, roughly spaced about 1 kilometre apart. Of those 23 holes, of the 25 holes drilled, 23 came back with rare earth bearing clays above the cutoff grade. So we do look quite favourably at the potential out to the east, and beyond that, we've got a new province up to the northwest, and we've just done some field work. We'll be looking at getting the drill rig spinning later this year, hopefully once our environmental impact statements have been approved for explorations on those tenements. Moving to the next slide, thanks. As far as our focus on going downstream, with a unique basket like ours, we've had strong interest, obviously, from a number of groups across Western markets, principally across the US, Europe, UK, India, and Asia. So it's a unique basket offering. With that unique product, we've identified a significant value addition that can be achieved by developing our own refinery. we continue to focus on that refinery. We've been evaluating locations, and we'll be in a position to update the market later in the year around the timing of the feasibility study and the mining license application out of Makuutu. Moving forward, so when we look at the supply chains that need to be built, the interest that we're receiving is around being a participant in the supply chain of these new magnet rare earths supply chains that need to be built across the US and Europe. Europe has identified targets to build magnet capacity by 2025, US 2026. So we're rapidly approaching the point where those domestic supply chains need to be built, again, creating a great opportunity for Ionic. Moving to the next slide, thanks. The final string to our bow is the magnet recycling piece. Earlier this year, we acquired a company in the UK called Seren Technologies. We are now moving ahead with a magnet demonstration plant, which we're aiming to have operational next year. And, we see a tremendous opportunity for magnet recycling to be a growing component solution to the world's requirement to identify, produce greater supply of magnet rare earths going forward. Presently, it makes up about 25% of refined rare earth production or magnet rare earth refined production globally. And so we think that this is an area that's going to increase, and increasingly there's going to be more demand to have jurisdictional recycling across Europe and North America. Moving to the next slide, thanks. So when we look at the value proposition, obviously we've got a very strategic asset with Makuutu, long life asset potential, and a target to get this mining license application submitted later this year for an award early next year to get Makuutu into production, ideally in the second half of 2024. Path to being vertically integrated by going downstream and unlocking the value of the basket, and incorporating magnet recycling. And these are key steps that enable us to be an early mover in being a participant in these magnet rare earth supply chains that are going to have to be built over the course of the next few years to be able to help North American and European stakeholders deliver on targets to be independently producing magnets by the allotted or the target dates. So that's our story. That's our focus. We've got a lot of catalysts over the course of the next 6 months, and a lot of work happening to unlock value out of the product at Makuutu and long-term supply chains that need to be built. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. A few questions here, quite a few questions here. One, when you talk rare earths, there can be radioactive elements associated. Is that an issue moving forward?
Yeah, look, it's an issue that plagues the hard rock projects, but the key differentiator for us is that being an ionic adsorption clay, we're not concentrating minerals. It's a chemical process whereby we're extracting the rare earth in an elemental form from the clay, and we precipitate it as mixed rare earth carbonate. So we bypass many of those issues that the hard rock players have to deal with, and it also affords us an opportunity to go downstream in some of these locations that, again, they'd have significant challenges in doing so.
And can you talk through you touched on it, but can you talk through the kind of pathway to production?
Yeah, so the focus for us is to get the mining license at Makuutu. I think that becomes a significant step that de-risks the project, de-risks the company, and potentially leads to a re-rate. Once we've got the mining license, we're able to, I suppose, be able to action or be able to move with a bit more colour around the downstream strategy. I think there's a number of interested parties who are interested in getting access to our product, but critical to this is really the mining license application being able to move forward with operations on the Makuutu Central area.
And when will you be in a position to talk with offtake partners, for example?
So, I mean, one of the issues with the rare earth supply chain and offtake is that these supply chains have to be built. It's going to take some time. We've been having discussions over the course of the last 18 months with potential participants in this space. There's a lot of work that's going on in order to try and build these supply chains. We are working and evaluating a number of strategic partner opportunities. It's it's a tough question to ask at this stage because there's a lot of moving parts, and we're hopeful of being in a position to be able to do something more meaningful once we can move forward with Makuutu.
And Tim, some of these automakers aren't kind of using rare earths in new kind of battery developments. Do you see that as a threat to your market size moving forward?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've seen this being talked about for quite some time. The reality is that the go-to magnet or the go-to motor in the EV space is the permanent magnet synchronous motors. It's the most efficient electric motor in application today. Those motors are dependent on supplies of not just NdPr, but critical to them is the dysprosium and terbium, which comes from today the ionic adsorption clays of southern China and Myanmar. And whilst China is looking at doubling the capacity out of their production, they're a net importer of rare earths at this point. There really isn't going to be much DyTb available for Western auto manufacturers as we approach the end of this decade, which again creates a great opportunity for Ionic to be a key enabler of both EVs and offshore wind over the next few years.
Great, Tim. That's all we have time for. There's another question there, if you don't mind asking it or answering it, rather. Have a nice weekend. We'll get you back on in the near future.
Thanks, Tim.